United States who had pontificated about the bill, did you read the bill? Well, no, he hadn't read the bill. Neither had the president. It's obvious from the first statement that he made. Neither had Janet Napolitano. She had to admit that under oath. And then we have John Morton, whose job it is to enforce immigration law under ICE, who talks about not using ICE to go pick up the people that are brought under the law enforcement wing of the Arizona law enforcement, like it's a discretionary thing. Who do they think they are? Mr. President, you're only the president. Attorney General, you're only the Attorney General. John Morton, you only head up ICE. You don't get to make these decisions. The people of America have vested their powers in a constitutional republic, a representative form of government, and they've asked their representatives to pass legislation, which we have in Washington and then in Arizona, where they mirror federal immigration law. And I will tell you, I believe it's completely constitutional, and if they argue that it's not, let them point to some place that's unconstitutional. So I went back and read through the lawsuit that has been introduced almost immediately by the ACLU, supported by MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense Foundation. Oddly, the race, La Raza, isn't on there yet. I'm sure they will introduce an amicus brief at some point. SEIU is on it. Let's see, the Muslim, some lists there that have sued too. They're all part of this. Let's see, I have it here. I should tell you exactly. The Muslim American Society, to be precise. They're all on this bill, on this lawsuit. And so the president directed the Attorney General to bring a lawsuit. The Attorney General didn't have any information that he could tell us about where the objections might be, but they commit to this path anyway. And then the Justice Department produced a draft complaint against Arizona's 1070 law. And so I asked for that draft complaint. Well, the Justice Department won't produce that. That's an internal document. Well, I think it should be a public document. So we've initiated some FOIA, some Freedom of Information Act requests, not only just to get at their draft complaint, but I want to see all the communications that they might have with the ACLU, the SEIU, and all those other left-wing organizations. And I have said, I've made this statement, that I believe the Justice Department has copied and pasted from the ACLU's lawsuit onto what will be their own. And when the day comes that becomes a public document, you'll be able to open them up side by side. And Carl, who gave the great speech over here, will be able to give you the definitive analysis of those two cases, because he's on the spot on with what he talked about. And by the way, that study that he referenced, the April 2005 GAO study, is one I asked for, and we worked on that for 2 years. And you can't hardly get the government to do apples to apples. And so we matched it up as closely as we could. We went to other federal studies. It is a statistical calamity in America, the loss of lives in this country at the hands of illegals who perpetrate acts of violence against American citizens. It is a calamity.
It is.
I've asked for another study, but I'd rather have some people in Congress that will stand up with a spine, that understand this rule of law. So I brought with me Arizona's law. The sheriff read the best part on it that he could. I will tell you, I've read this several times, and in here, there's 6 different references that prohibit the use of race to profile. 6 different references. You know that the White House and the executive branch of government has somehow or another willfully, I will say willful ignorance is the best thing I can say about what they've done. But when you misinform the American people and pit American people against American people with misinformation, which appears to be for reasons of political motivation, it is another tragedy in America that we can let that happen. We are rational human beings. We can think. Now, I want to just say a few things about immigration. It's something that I have stood on this issue for a long time, stood with Tom Cancredo for a long time. I am so grateful to be able to count him a friend, an individual who's made so much difference in the Congress and beyond. Where'd you go, Tom? And Nancy and Lou and Tom pulled this thing together. Like I say, this is a silk purse that we have here in Colorado today, and I'm grateful to you all. Where I stand on immigration is this. All the things that you heard Tom say, I'm with him, we stand together. I believe we need to defend the border. And I'll go further. I thought they were making it too hard to build a fence on the border. How can they spend so much money to build a fence? And so I come from the construction background. We build things. We also demolish things, but we build things. And so I like to put things together. So I sat down at the drawing board and drew up, not a fence, but a concrete wall. Now I think we ought to have a fence on the border, and it ought to be a pretty good one. And we ought to come in there X number of feet and build a patrol road. And then inside of that, so that we can defend it on both sides, we should build a concrete wall. And we can do that, this whole package, a road, a fence near the border, a concrete wall inside the border that can be patrolled. And so I designed that, put that together. We can do the wall for about $1.2 million a mile. You can do the whole thing for about $2 million a mile. Now that sounds like a lot of money. But here's what's going on. Nobody knows these numbers. They don't ask these questions. We're spending about $12 billion on our southern border. $12 billion. That comes out to be $6 million a mile. Now, if you just kind of think of a mile of road in Colorado, and think what that would be like if, let's just say, Janet Napolitano came to you with a contract and said, I really need you to defend this mile of our border. We're spending $6 million to defend that mile. I want you to be the one that has the contract to defend that mile. And this is a 10-year contract. So you've got $60 million to defend one single mile for the duration of the congressional budget, 10 years. Now, and I'd do it too. But would you hire 60 Border Patrol officers to stand there and watch that mile and then chase them 60 or 80 miles up into the desert? Or would you go, well, let me see, I've got $60 million to work with. Let me spend about $2 million and build a fence, a road, a wall, put a little wire on top of that wall, and some sensory devices up there, so that we can have a minimal number of people that are taking care of this infrastructure. That's a one-time investment with only a little bit of maintenance going on. That's what I'd do, and I'd have $58 million left in my contract. And I told this to Carl Rove one day. We were having this discussion. I said, Carl, if you give me $6 million a mile, there will not be a cockroach get across my mile. I guarantee it. And by the way, I think I'm the only person in America, or anywhere for that matter, that's actually gone down and built fence with the Minutemen and built fence with Michael Chertoff when he was Secretary of Homeland Security. Two different projects, obviously. But they wanted to replace fence with virtual. Remember the Boeing contract? We'll have virtual fence down there on the border. And I looked at some of that, ground-based radar and these kind of things. None of it ever worked. Virtual. Why wouldn't you do the thing you know you can do for the cheap price, build a fence, build a wall? If you want to fool around with virtual, fine, do that. Oh, and by the way, I'm not here saying we need 2,000 miles of fence. I just want to start building it where they're crossing it the most and keep building it till they quit going around the end. That's all you need to do. But to Michael Chertoff's credit, even though he's a judge, he came down and welded some of that landing mat fence with us one day down there southwestern Arizona. And I give him credit, you know, I don't think he'd ever had a welder in his hand before, and he welded a while in there. Not too bad for his first try. I had to do that a lot, so I welded some of that too. And then I said, well, this is great. I'm welding the virtual fence with this virtual welder. It feels good. Now hand me, oh, well, yeah, that's what I actually, the literal, then it became the virtual. He didn't get the joke, you did, and even though I blew it. So anyway, you know what I think down on the border? Let's spend our money right.